Hi there, you guys. Welcome to this Bank Holiday Holy Shed special, which is just a little bit different. I mean, to be honest, I was thinking of maybe giving it a break this week. And then I thought, nah, I'll do something that I fancy doing, something a little bit different. So anyway, part of that is that I'm just going to jump straight into what I have to say to you this week. And I'm also diverging from the stuff that we've been looking at over recent weeks, where we've looked at different approaches to reading the Bible, to check out one of my favourite alternative biblical writers doing his own bit of midrash with a paintbrush and canvas. Oh yes, I want to focus for a few minutes on the incredible Vincent van Gogh, who once said, "When I have a terrible need of, dare I say, religion, then I go outside at night and paint the stars." Which is a fantastic quote, but I also think it pretty much tells you everything that you need to know about Vincent, about his faith and about his paintings. But anyway, in particular, I want to focus today on his painting of the Good Samaritan, which, of course, connects to what we were talking about last week when we did our own bit of midrash on that story, thinking maybe of alternative versions like the parable of the good Black Lives Matters protester, or even the parable of the Trump supporter. Whichever hat fits, you could wear that. But Vincent himself, you may know, was the son of a Dutch Reformed minister, and then he went on himself to study theology, but he failed his entrance exam for seminary. So instead of following his father and his grandfather and becoming a minister, he went to Belgium as a missionary to the coal mining community there, where there were many people who were sick and starving, who were inadequately dressed to face the cold and so on. Really, they had a pretty bleak existence. And when he arrived there and saw just how bleak their existence was, he basically went away and gave away everything that he owned, including most of his clothing, in order to care for these people in the mining community. And he tended their medical needs too by ripping up his bed sheets for bandages and ended up sleeping on straw on the floor. And of course the miners loved him for all this. They thought this was amazing. But weirdly, his church overseers saw it quite differently. They were displeased with what they saw as an expression of overzeal, and basically they saw him as being undignified because he didn't dress up properly in a suit and give eloquent sermons and so on. I think they couldn't realize that what he was doing was in fact the most eloquent sermon of all. So, yep, they fired him, and this was a devastating thing for Vincent. I think it might be one of the great shadows that we see cast across the rest of his life, actually. It took a great toll on his mental health at the time, leading him probably to a nervous breakdown, and his father was making inquiries about having him committed to an asylum. Thankfully, however, his brother Theo, who was another great figure in his life, was captivated by Vincent's paintings, and in particular the paintings that Vincent had done of the mining community whilst he was there. Paintings like this, for instance, absolutely extraordinary images. And I really love this one, actually, of a mining family. And anyway, I think that Theo was so impressed with all of this that he convinced Vincent to begin formal art studies, and of course that was a big event in his life. For me, Van Gogh's paintings are really some of the most eloquent prayers ever. I mean, that's how I see all of Van Gogh's paintings. One way or another, I think they are all fundamentally prayers. He once said, "Some people write books and others paint pictures." But I would like to say, looking at Van Gogh's paintings, some people pray prayers, others magnificently paint prayers. That's how I see it. And there are lots of incredible stories about him. There's one story about him rescuing a prostitute, and it comes out in one of the letters that he wrote to Theo. And this is what he said. He said, I met a pregnant woman deserted by the man whose child she carried. A pregnant woman who had to walk the streets in winter, had to earn her bread some way. So I took her for a model and worked with her all through the winter. I couldn't pay her the full wages of a model, he says, but that did not prevent me paying her rent, and thank God, so far, I have been able to protect her and her child from hunger and cold by sharing my own bread with her. So what an amazing person, who I think had this strong sense that love is only love when it's expressed in actions. And that's, I think one of the core values of Vincent. Now, obviously, there was another side to this man, and most people know Vincent as the man who cut off his own ear and finally shot himself. And so I think there's no doubt that Vincent was a troubled soul with, sometimes quite self-destructive tendencies. But I'm pretty sure the church didn't help with that in the way that they treated him. And as you know, later in life he was committed to St Paul's psychiatric asylum in Saint-Rémy de Provence, where he actually ended up painting some of his greatest works, including, of course, Starry Night. This probably his most famous painting, which is, there are lots of versions of it, but it's stunning, isn't it? And as I say, for me, I read into this so much about his faith as a person, and the starry sky. It's a symbol of the skies being full of divinity. And but it's interesting looking down on this village there, that you've got various, most of the houses have got lights in them. It's like, God is in these houses. But the one building you'll see there, which doesn't have any light in it at all, is the church, right bang there in the middle. It's as if, he's recognizing that as a place of death and not of life. It's also significant that right in the foreground you've got this wonderful cypress tree, which it seems to me is in contrast to the steeple, as if he's saying something about nature being the real steeple, the real kind of connection between heaven and earth, between God and the world. So yeah, it's an amazing image. But it was in the asylum that he also painted his most explicitly religious works, including, the raising of Lazarus and also the Good Samaritan, which I think is worth looking at, pondering in the light of his personal story, as I've just been saying. It's interesting too that it's one of a number of paintings which is a reproduction of a similar painting, and this time it's Delacroix's painting, which is on the left-hand side of your screen, and so you can see that it is actually a mirror image, and both paintings are absolutely glorious. But if I had to choose, I'd go for Van Gogh's every time. It's a much lighter image, isn't it? And let's have a look at it a little bit more closely. Yeah, I wonder what catches your eye as you look there. Obviously, there's the two figures in the middle. This Samaritan man, who you can see is just stretching every muscle and sinew to lift this poor man onto his donkey, and you just feel the sort of effort that is being put into that, and the helplessness and reliance of the man on the Samaritan with his arm around his neck. What's interesting about that, I notice, is that both men are wearing blue. Their breeches are blue, and blue is often seen to be a sort of sign of divinity in Van Gogh's paintings. Whether or not you see that, what I see is that there's a common humanity, that these two men from different worlds, from races or backgrounds which are at odds with each other, at enmity with each other, there is this common humanity that unites them, and that's what this Samaritan finds toward the man. I love the donkey. There's a sort of meekness about its stance, a humble donkey, not a great stallion, not a war horse, a donkey, which I think for me, makes references back to the beast that carried Mary when she was pregnant with Jesus, and also the humble donkey that took Jesus into the city toward the end of his life at Jerusalem. I love that beast in the image. But then you notice there's the two men, aren't there? The priest and the Levite over to the left of the picture. And what really strikes me so much about these two characters is that they've got their backs to us, they've got their backs to what is happening, they have walked away from this. They're also very kind of grey characters. They almost blend into the countryside. It's as if they're disappearing through the very act that they have performed of ignoring the needs of another. So whereas this Samaritan man is embracing his humanity, there are these two guys who are walking away. Their humanity is fading. I like the open box on the left-hand side too, which presumably is, where he got out his ointment and so on to treat the man. And there's that sense of complete openness, of availability in that. So, yeah, what an incredibly wonderful picture it is. Vincent was basically a misfit, wasn't he, in his world, as indeed Jesus himself too was a misfit. And I think somehow I'm always attracted to the misfits. I don't know whether that's because I am one, but sometimes I think that their version of reality is much more true than the reality which they are struggling with. And sometimes, like with Vincent, perhaps it's deemed to be insanity when in actual fact maybe that's the true sanity. We had a friend called Peter Thompson, a man who's sadly left us now. He was an amazing Australian Anglican priest who lived with us in North London for a while, and he was actually instrumental in convincing me to become ordained in the Church of England. Excuse me. And he was something of a misfit too. There are so many stories about Peter that I could tell you, funny stories and moving stories. Maybe I'll tell you some of them on another occasion. But one of them is that at the start of his ministry, Peter was assigned by the bishop to a parish, this is in Australia, to a parish in a very poor community which struggled to be able to cover his stipend. And being a passionate Christian socialist, inspired a great deal by the writings of the Scottish philosopher John McMurray about communitarianism, Peter decided to do something practical to be able to help the people in this situation. So he decided to do some part-time work as a teacher to help to pay his way and not be too great a burden on them. And his wife, who was a hairdresser, set up a small salon in the church hall, and she gave all the proceeds from that to the church to help the church to survive. But rather like Vincent, Peter's dedication was seen in a different light by church authorities. And his archdeacon came and told him that he couldn't do this. He said, you have to give up teaching and just be the full-time priest here and close that salon, or you'll have to leave the parish, you'll have to leave the job. And Peter appealed to the bishop, and the bishop upheld the decision of the archdeacon. And so Peter was forced to leave the parish for refusing to comply. And, that story reminds me so much of the story of Vincent. And the story of the Good Samaritan, especially interpreted so beautifully by Van Gogh in that picture, poses, I think, a choice to religion. I'll put the picture back on so you can see it again as I'm saying this. I think that this story poses a choice to the church, to religion, but also to each and every one of us, because it's a choice between becoming more deeply human or to become dehumanized, to fade into the background, into the greyness that these figures are doing. A church that looks after its own interest or insists that it alone has the truth is a pale image of what it could be. But as I say, to some extent, we all face that choice every day, to stay human, to become more deeply who we are made to become, who we are at our core, or to shift away from that, to become mere shadows of who we truly are called to be. Sometimes we do need to suffer for the sanity of being truly human in an inhumane world where all the values are upside down. There's a wonderful story, an old Jewish story about a rabbi who asked his followers one day, he said, "How do we know when the night is giving way and the morning is coming?" So one of the disciples stood up and he said, "Teacher, won't we know that night is fading when through the dim light we can see an animal and recognize whether it's a sheep or a dog?" The rabbi said, "No." "Rabbi," said another, "won't we know that the dawn is coming when we can see clearly enough to distinguish whether a tree is a fig tree or an olive tree?" Once again the rabbi shook his head. "We'll know that the night has passed," he said, "when we can look at any man or any woman and know that we're looking at a brother or a sister. Until we can detect that," he said, "the night will always be within us." So there's a few thoughts. It's one of my mantras, stay human. And to me, that's what I see in the story of Vincent van Gogh. It's what I see in the story of our gorgeous friend Peter. It's what I see in this parable of the Good Samaritan. So let's pray a prayer. God of starry nights, illuminating our darkness, we are grateful for those defiant spirits who have suffered for sanity in a senseless world. For wounded heroes whose broken hallelujahs announce a different wisdom fashioned by love and meekness. God, grant us serenity to remain true to our deepest instincts when the current of popular opinion pulls in a different direction. God, grant us vision in dark times to know when we are looking at a sister or brother in need of our help. And God, grant us courage to step out of our comfort zones in order to stay human in inhuman times. Amen. So look, we're done, but we've got time for a toast, haven't we? So if you've got a drink handy, grab a hold of it now, pour yourself a little something, and let's make a toast. I'd like to toast Vincent van Gogh, bless his cotton socks. I'd like to, with that, toast defiant spirits and wounded heroes everywhere, in whatever section of community they are. I'd like to toast models of compassion when the world is caught up in selfish insanity. It's a toast to the insurmountable beauty of stars shining in dark skies. A toast to everything, that's good and true and loving in our world, which resonates with the deepest instincts of who we are down here. So hey guys, raise your glasses to life. L'chaim. Smashing. So there it is, folks. If you like it, if you like what I'm doing, you can support me by buying me a coffee. The link to the coffee site is always at the top of the posts on the Holy Shed Facebook page. And once again, many, many thanks to all those of you who contribute to our well-being in that way. So I'm going to leave you today with a fabulous song by Paul Field. Been around a long time, Paul. I remember hearing him at Greenbelt long time ago. And this is a song in more recent times by him called God of the Moon and Stars. And I think it really very eloquently expresses so much of what I've just been trying to say. And in places it pushes pushes the borders a little bit of what maybe some people can deal with in terms of seeing God in our world. But there it is. Go well, guys. Stay human, and I'll see you soon. Oh, and remember what Vincent once said: the best way to know God is to love many things. See you soon.
God of the moon and stars, God of the near and far, God of these fragile hearts we are, I come to you. God of our history, God of the future that will be, what will you make of me? I come to you. God of the meek and mild, God of the reckless and the wild, God of the unreconciled, I come to you. God of our life and death, God of our secrets unconfessed, God of our every living breath, I come to you. God of the rich and poor, God of the princess and the whore, God of the ever open door, I come to you. God of the unborn child, God of the pure and undefiled, God of the pimp and the pedophile, I come to you. God of the war and peace, God of the junkie and the priest, God of the greatest and the least, I come to you. God of the refugee, God of the prisoner, slave and free, God of my doubts and my certainty, come to you. God of our joy and grief, God of the lawyer and the thief, God of my faith and unbelief, I come to you. God of the wounds we bear, God of the deepest dreams we share, God of our unspoken prayer, I come to you. God of a world that's lost, God of a lonely, lonely cross, God who has come to us, we come to you.